Do you really wanna make me cry? Do you really wanna hurt me? Do you really wanna make me cry? Thank you so much. Do you really wanna hurt me? Do you really wanna make me cry? Here we go. Ah yeah, ah yeah, ooh. Ah yeah, ooh. Never have much faith in love or miracles. Ooh. Never wanna put my heart on the line.
Hello, viewers. It's James Kalm, your half-assed reporter, and I'm back. And we're gonna step in here to Cheim Read. And it pains me to say this, but perhaps for the last time, we're gonna be looking at an exhibition here of Joan Mitchell paintings from the middle of the last century, 1953 to 1962. I'll make a quick pan of the installation, then we'll come back and look at some of these in a little more depth.
And then the chaos slips behind you, so you get that tension between the foreground screen, which is ordered.
Well, I said that it pains me to say that this exhibition is probably either the last or the next to the last show that we're going to be covering here, because Cheim Read is closing their gallery. I think this is the oldest piece in the show. This is Untitled, 1953-1954. Oil on canvas, 81 by 69.25 inches. I'll read a little bit from the press release so you have an idea of the history that Cheim Read has with Joan Mitchell. Cheim Read is pleased to announce its next exhibition, Joan Mitchell Paintings from the Middle of the Last Century. Blah, 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 blah. This is the 9th solo show at the gallery, devoted to her paintings and drawings, and the 19th to include her work overall. So, Cheim Read has been operating, I believe, here for about 20 years, so they've had a long history of representing and championing Joan Mitchell's work. Well, I was looking at this and I think this is an interesting painting because, for one thing, this is much thinner than Joan's more mature work. I think they're talking about Joan Mitchell actually showed with the first generation abstract expressionists, Hans Hofmann, Mark Rothko, William de Kooning, and Clifford Still in the famous 9th Street show. But at that point, she was only 28 years old. And I was thinking that this kind of makes me think of some of Philip Guston's work from that time, but also kind of the thinness and the drippiness of the paint put me in mind of Sam Francis. It's titled Lien's Colors, 1956, oil on canvas, 56 by 76. Okay, so this is a couple of years later. And, well, you can see that Joan is getting a little more body color, a little more impasto with her painting. And strangely, I was kind of looking at this and thinking that somehow this made me think of a Soutine. I know a lot of her whip strokes, her kind of lashing, slippery brush strokes. Also, I think palette kind of relates to some of the late Soutine still lives. Untitled 1960. Well, they talk about how from a very early age, I say maybe her late 20s, early 30s, that Joan Mitchell kind of established herself as the, what do they call her, the lady painter, or the lady abstract painter. But I'm kind of looking at this and thinking that Joan was out there. She was looking at a lot of stuff. I guess she studied with Hans Hofmann. And, oh, this is nice with the charcoal drawing in there. She was probably hanging out at the club where, you know, the bad boys were drinking and fighting, and she had a reputation for holding her own. It's titled Skiff, 1959, oil on canvas, 77 by 74. I do think that a certain amount of this early work is kind of, well, derivative, or it's influenced by the big boys, maybe. This kind of relates to Franz Klein. Although I have to say that I think that Joan always had an exceptional color sense. Okay, I like this pencil line across the bottom, and I'm thinking maybe she had this tacked on her wall and was going to crop it there. Now, I think these two works from the late 50s are very good examples of Joan really coming into her own. And I think that this is when she kind of reached a level of maturity and really did come up with a unique touch and approach. And again, great color things. You know, for a lot of the abstract expressionists, there's a vernacular, there's an alchemy of just paint and what happens to paint. You can go back a few months and look at some of our previous reports on Al Held or Milton Resnick, and a lot of the painting that they were doing was really kind of just dealing with the material of pigment and oil or pollen or resins. And there is a kind of an alchemical sense to that, but in that sense, these paintings are not finished. I come in and I look at these and they probably have changed the surface dryness, the cracking, the facture. these pigments and resins are still doing their work. This is Untitled, 1958, 78 by 68. I think the other thing that has gotten a lot of people's attention about Joan is that, 3 or 4 years ago, I think one of her paintings sold for $42 million, something like that. And as Friedrich Hayek has said, the market gives you information, and this information passes more efficiently than any kind of control economy could ever imagine. And once everybody realized that Joan was getting that kind of price at auction, suddenly she moved up into the status of a superstar. And although that might be a little bit below someone like Jean-Michel Basquiat, who got over 100 million, I would say that that's really pretty respectable. And again, great palette. Let's go in the back room. Untitled, 1960. Well, we've moved into another decade. Just comment a little bit on her, kind of her style of working. A lot of these pieces have a kind of a central cluster, central form that she then kind of adds flourishes to around the edge. Also, I'm noticing that she uses this salmon pink. You know, it's not a straight red that she kind of tints down her, at least in a lot of these, tints down her reds to this kind of a salmon color, which is actually even nicer for a contrast with her greens. Some critics have said that she's maybe one of the best of the abstract landscape painters. And, I don't know whether that's accurate, but something like this does give you kind of a feel for work that was coming later, when she basically moved to France and was working near where Monet was doing his water lily paintings. Also, I'm thinking that, she's got this technique of the flings of ropes of paint. It's kind of nice, but it relates to, like the stems of a thistle or something. Untitled, 1960. And here we have our salmon red. You know, as I said, a lot of abstract expressionists really got into the idea of just exactly what pigment was. They were thinking about it as some kind of substance that had its own embodied content, its own embodied meanings or implications. And some of this I can see that Joan is just using pretty near straight out of the tube pigments. It's a nice kind of turquoise blue. Blue Michigan, oil on canvas 51 by 63 inches. Now I think this is the kind of stuff that Harold Rosenberg was talking about when he was writing his piece about the action painters. And yeah, you can't help but look at this paint that's been flung on like this and not think about the performative aspect of painting. And I think the nice thing about Joan is that she could contrast a nice passage like this of terp washes against a nice, thickly painted brush passage like this, and then fling in her glops of paint on top of that, and kind of make these contrasts all harmonize. Last room. I think this might be my favorite piece in the show. This is Untitled 1960. And I say that because I find this one the most coloristically appealing. I talk a lot about paint and what you can do with paint, and what I like is the contrasts. And I would say that Joan, even at an early stage of her career like this, had a great facility with getting various kinds of surface things to happen. Also, I was talking about her use of pigment. I think this violet is cobalt violet, a very expensive pigment, and yeah, it says something about her generosity that she would glop this stuff on so thickly. Also, yeah, it's interesting to see how this has changed over time and dried out. This is Garden Party, 1961-62, oil on canvas 63 by 50 inches. Well, I was thinking about her flailed and flung paint, and I was thinking that she was probably visiting and looking at a lot of the most advanced painting that was going on at the time, and so she obviously was aware of people like Jackson Pollock and de Kooning. But I'm thinking that I think Francis Bacon made the critique of Pollock's work saying that it looked like old lace doilies. And by that, I think that Bacon was talking about the fact that a Pollock painting, especially his dripped and squeeze pieces, the pigment sits on top of the canvas as almost a separate kind of material object. And I think that one of the great things about Joan is that maybe she was also looking at Helen Frankenthaler, who was doing a lot of staining. And Joan is also kind of doing a lot of dripping and staining and wiping. Also, as far as the comparison to Pollock was working on the floor, but I always get the feeling looking at Joan's paintings that these are hanging on a wall or on an easel. We're going to finish our visit up with a look at this piece. Mandra is 1961-62, oil on canvas, 87 by 78. And I believe this is the largest piece in the show. I think it's also interesting to note, I was talking about Helen Frankenthaler, but Helen and a lot of the stain painters, and especially the acrylic painters, were working on raw cotton duck. So a lot of this was unprimed. And, well, when you work on a raw fabric like that, the absorption and the way that the pigment is taken up by the fabric is different. These works, I believe, are all on linen. And so it's been primed with maybe rabbit skin glue and gesso. So even when Joan is staining and splashing and dripping, it has a different character than it would on the raw linen. Also, this is interesting. Got a little squib of white paint that she's flung on there, but you can see how that's shinier. And so it's not just a question of how much oil or medium or varnish you have in there. There's also different qualities in the way the pigment over time reacts chemically to age and the other qualities of the oil and the pigment. This is great because I believe this is nice little chunks of cobalt blue. Also, I like the way that Joan is able to go back in with the white and kind of reestablish a white ground under some of the areas that she might have worked over and decided she wanted to kind of introduce that space again. James Kalm reporting on Joan Mitchell. Paintings from the middle of the last century, 1953 to 1962. Here at Cheim Read. You can like this, subscribe, and recommend it to your friends. You can leave your critiques, suggestions, ideas below. We wish the partners at Cheim Read good luck in their future projects. And as always, we have to say, thank you, Kate. Electric Jiggy, right?
Electric Jiggy, J-I-G-G-Y, Jiggy.
All right.
Follow me on Instagram.
Thank you, Electric Jiggy.
Thank you.
That was nice. Thank
I'm
you.
glad you enjoyed it.
Thanks.